We're on to our first guest, and he has written a book that reaching out to people through his own personal testimony of how the Lord has helped him. And it's entitled Bipolar Missionary, and it's written by Paul Samuels. Would you welcome Paul Samuels to the show tonight? So glad you could be here tonight. And this is, the title of it is Bipolar Missionary. Healing the past, shaping the future. What happened to you that you would write this book?
I feel like the Lord gave me a word to use 2 Corinthians 1, where God is the God of all comfort.
Right.
And I'm to share the comfort that He has brought to me, even having bipolar.
Yeah. Now, how did you discover that you had bipolar?
I had a mania event that got me before a judge.
Oh, wow.
And this is really great. The judge said, I've been looking here. I don't find a record on you, son. I don't know what's wrong with you, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to sentence you to see a psychiatrist.
Oh, wow.
It was the best thing that ever happened to me. When I heard that I had bipolar, and it finally explained why I did the things I did, why I got trapped where I got trapped, and why I couldn't control it. It was so freeing.
Now, what were you doing, and what was going on in your life at this time that you had when you had this episode?
Well, I had just come off from mission field, and
oh, wow,
and working part-time in that, but you know, it doesn't have a special time. It just, bipolar is a mood disorder. And the wrong thing at the wrong time could just have your mind moving in a different direction. I like to tell people when they say, well, how does that work? What is that? It's sort of like the wiring in your brain is just not going the way it should, and it produces some extra emotions that you may or may not be able to control. But by the grace of God, there's medication that can control it.
Yeah. Now, when you have this kind of thing happen, are you aware of it when it's taking place?
It just depends. You know, I have a wonderful wife of 48 years.
Oh, wow.
And she can say to me, Paul, do you realize your voice is getting a little bit stronger and you seem to have some tension in it? Well, that would tell me that my medication was running out.
Oh, yeah.
I need to do something about it. And there are different routines I do. One of my favorite is just talking to the mirror and saying, look, Lord, you know what's happening here? I need to get past this.
Wow. Yeah. So when you were diagnosed with it, but how does someone develop bipolar disorder?
Well, you know, the scientists and the doctors, they don't really know. It comes from so many. It could be an inheritance from your generations of families. It could be a PT drama that happened in your mind.
Yeah.
Something that caused you. You could have been drugged. My personal thing, I believe that I got 3 serious head injuries when I was a young boy. And I was also coming through an abuse situation. And all that drama, I believe, is what opened up the bipolar.
So when you wrote this book, what is this book really what does it show us? Is it your own personal experience?
It's totally just my experience. But I like to tell somebody, if you really want to know the depth of God's love and forgiveness, you read my book, because I certainly don't deserve the love and forgiveness that I have received from the Lord. And I want people to understand that bipolar and mental illness is no different than someone having a physical illness. You just can't see ours. But we need the same kind of sensitivity and appreciation and concern that's given to people that have a physical illness.
And when you're talking about your personal testimony, by the way, I agree with you wholeheartedly that none of us deserve the love that God gave to us.
Amen.
You know, I'm so thankful that He loved all of us. You know, because we all kind of got our same start in the same place. We were without hope and we were without God,
Amen.
Not deserving either one. But you've been able to actually take what you've been through and actually show the love of God through this on how what you've gone.
You know, I mentioned to you earlier, I'm in my 80th year of life.
Wow.
And I'm so grateful that God has allowed me an opportunity. I'm a co-facilitator in 2 bipolar groups. I get to meet with people who share where they are at that time, talk about how can we deal with that particular situation. And it's so comforting for people with bipolar or any mental illness to come into a peer support group. And it's like stepping into a world where you really feel accepted and understood.
Yeah. How does bipolar affect both the person that may be going through the bipolar? That's the first part of this. But then the second part, I want you to explain, what is it? What do families need to know about someone that has gone through bipolar?
Well, families really need to read up on bipolar and understand. They need to be a part of the therapy that the person who has bipolar is going through. My wife comes with me when I have my annual time with the psychiatrist, and we talk about it. But I'll tell you, a lot of the pressure falls on me, the person with bipolar, because the single most problem in marriages with bipolar is when the person with bipolar decides, oh, I'm okay now. I don't need my medication. Then he's off or she's off. So it's a lot of cooperation with each other. We have to develop procedures. I know exactly when I'm taking my medication. When I wake up in the morning, I know when to take it. I know in midday when it starts wearing off. It's my responsibility.
Yeah.
But my mate, she knows my procedures too, and she walked through this with me. She's more compassionate than I can even say.
Well, it's kind of like what the Lord does when He loves us. He loves us not only by Himself, but He also usually sends somebody along to love, show us His love too as well. So that's awesome. That's awesome. What you said that you facilitate meetings for bipolar. What are you seeing happening right now in some of those groups? How does those chats develop?
Well, let me step out of that for a second and say that the CDC has really just said that mental illness is at a catastrophic event in our country right now. And a lot of that happens because all of the institutions that you would go to 40 years ago, they don't exist any longer.
Yeah.
Those people are sleeping on our streets, unmedicated, untreated. But we go through, when someone comes to a meeting, the first thing we do is we sit there, we give our name, and I say, hi, I'm Paul, I have bipolar 2, and everybody goes around the room and says that. So we understand we're in a room with different kinds of, some is just depression or a bipolar 1 and 2, and so just being able to say to each other, this is what I have, and to know that you're accepted is worth its weight in gold.
Now, Paul, you said something interesting that I haven't heard before. You said there's bipolar 1 and there's bipolar 2. Are there other levels of bipolar, and what are some of the differences?
Well, there is a third one. Well, bipolar 1, as we like to say, is probably the most severe. That's where you can have a real experience with what we call mania, where you lose control and you may not even know where you are. And bipolar 2, I might get up to a little bit of mania, but not anything serious. And there's another one, it's cholesterol something or other I can never pronounce, but it's a lower level. But you know, one of the things that people don't realize about bipolar is there is a lot of creativity and a lot of good things that happen when they're feeling their excitement in the mid-mania range. Lots of actors and actresses, like I can name the Star Wars Princess Leia. She finally came out and said that she was bipolar, but she did it the whole series. She worked her way through it.
Yeah. Wow. And just working through, do we know what level that she's at? I mean,
I don't know that they went into that, but I just read an article that's being a part of my next book, which is called The Voices of Bipolar, because that's part of what I feel God's called me to, is to help people understand not just me and my book, but the many, many people who have bipolar. We are ordinary people that have an illness.
Yeah.
And we want from you the same understanding you would give to somebody with a broken leg or cancer.
Right.
But see, bipolar, when it comes to conversation, you don't see a lot of open conversation.
Has it been stigmatized, you think?
It is stigmatized.
Yeah.
And we need to break through the stigmatism by just recognizing it's something that can be controlled. Yes, there's highs and lows, and this, you were telling me earlier about someone who just went off. That happens, but we have to fight for the control and to walk in it in everyday living.
Right, sure. What would you say to someone that is living with someone that they suspect that bipolar may be developing within that individual? What would you tell them?
I'll tell you the same thing that we tell the people in a group when they pose this problem. There are programs on YouTube about bipolar where people who have bipolar have chosen to come forward and share their life, how they develop bipolar, what they're doing about it, different systems they use to control it. So the question is, educate yourself. You have to educate yourself, especially this is someone you love, you're going to be with the rest of your life. You need to walk in his or her shoes.
Yeah.
But conversely,
Yeah.
the person with bipolar has to do their job. No playing around saying, I don't feel like myself, I'm not going to take my medicine. That's one of the big, real troubling things in this relationship.
You've said that a couple of times in this interview. What do you do with someone, what do you recommend to someone that says, you know what, I'm okay, I don't need the medication, I'm normal? You know, how do you reach those individuals?
It depends on your relationship. If there's someone in our group that says, you know, I got to a place that I don't think I need my meds anymore. I mean, we go around the room with numbers of people saying to that person, let me tell you about when I stopped taking. Let me tell you about when she stopped taking. And we go through the familiarity of what happens when you don't take your medicine.
Yeah.
It's not curable. You know, like you said earlier, God can certainly cure anything.
Right.
But bipolar is not curable. You have to maintain it.
Yeah, yeah. So would you reach out to groups, you know, as a family member? Would you reach out to a group? Would you reach out to maybe psychologist, counselor? How would you do that?
Our particular group invites what we call support to come in. We are a peer group. We're not doctors, we're not scientists.
Right.
We're peers. We're helping each other walk through what we're all walking through. But we welcome people who, just the other day, a sister came in who didn't know anything really about bipolar except that her sister was just really strange. And she listened in the group, she asked questions, she talked to us, and the next time her sister came with her, and that relationship was built a lot closer. So it's education, it's learning, and walking, what's that saying, walking in another man's shoes, so to speak?
Right, yeah. What would you tell someone that they're having those highs and lows? They're having those highs and lows, but they're maybe apprehensive of reaching out. Can they find a place where they look in and just are curious to just kind of I don't know, just peer, you know, just
Absolutely. Anyone's welcome to our groups. And most groups will allow people to come in and just say, when you come in, you just say, I'm my husband, wife, brother, sister, I think has something like bipolar, and I'm kind of curious. But the really best way, I really do propose, the best way is to get on YouTube and pull up those bipolar stories that people are sharing their life right there in front of you.
Yeah.
And there's a number of them and some really good explanations from some of the doctors. So to educate yourself, the more a person educates themselves, I dare say, the more compassion they can have for the person they have who's suffering.
I do know that understanding has the ability to unlock compassion. So once you understand it, I think sometimes if we only know bits and pieces and maybe what is pop culture, stereotypes, we can kind of prejudice ourselves against people with this condition. But honestly, I think you're right. Compassion has to be unlocked through understanding. So now you said your groups. Now you said, and you've recommended us to YouTube. But where are your groups actually? Are you on Facebook, Instagram?
Well, no, our groups meet at a church, Johnson's Ferry Baptist Church, and other areas. It's called throughout the state. Somebody could just Google bipolar groups and a number of our groups would come up. And we have them all over the state. I'm just merely in the church that I mentioned.
Right.
But, the important thing is to really care. I was started to tell a story that there's another thing about bipolar. It's a combination of being 80 and bipolar. That story just went up there.
Went to the cloud. Yeah.
But we have to stand with each other as peers and just stand with each other as peers. I wish you say that again, whatever that was, because that story just went somewhere.
Well, I asked you, are you on Facebook now? You're actually meeting in a church, but do you have social media places where they can go?
Well, that's another thing. There are lots of, believe it or not, I'm not a great fan of Facebook per se.
Okay.
But there are over 100 bipolar face groups on that anyone could dial into and meet with these people, talk with people. But the overall best is to get in the face of this thing. If you have someone who has bipolar, love them, talk to them, try to understand them, get them to open up to you. I just got the question back. It was stigma. That's the biggest problem, and this is really hilarious. They were talking one day about someone with a mental problem. We don't know what his mental problem was, but he shot up a mall. And so we were talking in the group, and one of the fellas says, Paul, a lot of stigma comes out of this that's erroneous, but people really don't understand. If someone with bipolar was going to do any shooting, we'd be shooting ourselves because we couldn't stand it anymore. We're not going out and shoot up somebody else.
Yeah.
So bipolar has that kind of a stigma to it. Someone asked me in a film I was doing, Paul, what would you say was the main thing you could be concerned about having bipolar? And my response was, my main concern is whether or not they're going to treat me like a normal human being, or are they going to be afraid to be in the very room with me because I might do something.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's an interesting way of being perceived. Well, Paul has written Bipolar Missionary. This is his personal step, and you also have 2 more books that are coming out. You've written 3 altogether, but not published yet. But what's the goal of this book? Is just to let people know how God loves us and how He helps us regardless of where we come from. And
you got it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
We really want. I felt so strongly that God led me to do that, to share the way He's blessed me. He can bless everyone.
That's right.
With that. Don't be afraid of bipolar. Don't be afraid of mental health altogether.
Well, thank you for coming on the program, Paul. And if you know someone, make sure you get the book and help those that may be suffering from that.